Hello, and thank you for choosing the Roosta Show. This is Roosta Jones, and I'm your host. And we have Athan from the many bands. Oh my lord, Fahrenheit 451, Spahn Ranch, but Tubalcain, Vampire, Rodents. I didn't even know. I had no idea. Didn't even know, guys. It's nice to have this gentleman here today. He also has a new project called Noir. So we're gonna find out about this. We're gonna find out about all of them. We do this. We investigate here. We investigate good music. So good to have him. Hello.
Hey, there you are.
Wonderful. I knew it was a hat day.
It's a heck kind of a day. How
Yes,
are you, man?
sir. Well, wonderful, man. Good morning to you. And it's I was in California.
I'm
Oh,
in New York.
I'm just joking. I was just testing you to see if you were
Uh,
awake. Just joking.
what's happening?
I'm doing wonderful actually. It's been a great morning actually. So let's go ahead and let's talk about some of your different projects. Then we're gonna end up talking about your new project. Well, last time we got to know you personally, know that you came from a nice vocal background and all that good stuff. So today, let's start off with Fahrenheit 451. I know that you were in that from 84 to what was like 86, right? And
87, yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah.
did you guys actually uh like jam out in a meat locker?
We did, and surprisingly, that came up the other day. That's in Montclair, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. And that meat locker, to this day, almost 4 decades later, that's where a lot of like death metal bands jam and do pass the hat shows inside the meat locker.
What the
It's kind of a thing. I guess it's for because underage kids can't go to clubs. So it's kind of a way of doing. I mean, I'm sure you remember like the hardcore matinee shows and all that, like, and metal did the same thing on
yeah.
Saturdays, occasionally on Sundays. But this is sort of a version of that, but it's more like I don't know, it's a little bit more like playing a cafe or something, but it just happens to be a series of old meat lockers that sound good because they're all
Yeah.
they're insulated with like double insulation and aluminum in the walls. There's no windows, so it's just pure volume. So
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah, it's so
yeah, yeah.
funny.
I think
And
they still call it the meat locker. I think so. And back in the 80s, it was us, Fahrenheit 451, and then the next band who had one was a rockabilly band called the Gyros. And there were a few other bands in there from that quintessential sort of 80s time period. But
uh,
it's funny, as much as things change, they remain the same. So that's what I kind of
yeah.
like.
Well, I was jamming out to your album just yesterday, The House of Morals. I love it. I've always loved that album. It's you guys have it's an anniversary came out, right? For that?
Yeah, well, I guess we're kind of fast approaching the 40th, but we had
Yeah.
reissued it for the 35th a few years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, that's an amazing album.
Thank you.
Actually, you guys were so iconic. You guys were goth before you became goth. So that's amazing. And so good job on that project.
Thank
And
you.
now you guys broke up and became another band, did you? I mean, they broke up into different
I
projects.
left the band. The band broke up. I moved to Philadelphia and joined Executive Slacks.
Okay,
Uh,
that's right. Executive
one of the
Slacks.
guys in the band joined the Undead, which was sort of a misfit side project. And then another guy in the band, the bass player Pete, started like a female glam metal
Yeah,
group called Cycle Sluts from Hell. So yeah, so we all kind of got around a little bit. So
that's awesome. Executive Slacks. So they're more of industrial, more dance, more EBM ish.
Yeah, more like
More like that.
like an experimental
Yeah,
industrial sort of
almost like a it's a rebish, huh? I guess.
a little bit. Yeah, I mean, at
Yeah,
the same
that type
time
of
period,
stuff.
Front for Two, perhaps with a little bit of Killing Joke thrown in there.
How was that? Was that a good
That was a great
experience?
experience. I mean, I we did a lot of stuff. I mean, we opened for Jane's Addiction and Fields of the Nephilim and The Mission and KMFDM and Alien Sex Fiend. I mean, we played everywhere. And yet, unfortunately, we made a bunch of recordings, but we never, the version of the band I was in, never got to actually release an album.
Ah,
So oddly enough, I'm actually thinking about it now, about collecting some of this stuff from that. I guess I was in that group 88 to about 91. And
okay.
I'm thinking about maybe putting out a collection of some of the material from that time period. Obviously way after the fact, but I just need to talk to some of the former members and see where everybody's at with that. Kind of
Yeah,
going through all these old, it's
that'd
funny,
be
like
exciting, man. That'd be exciting. You probably had
yeah,
enough
it's kind
material
of
to
funny.
do it anyways, huh?
Well, it's one of these things like when it's when you've been around the block a few times, I mean, I guess you just start piling up all these different projects and bands
Yeah.
and again, you focus on one and like Spahn Ranch was of course, really the most important band, I guess you could say I was in the 90s. I mean, we did the most amount of stuff. But now
Yeah,
that
they were.
looking back on that entire era, I'm able to now think about like, hey, how about releasing some of this, the unreleased, odds and ends on the side that never came out, whether it's Fahrenheit 451 or whether it's Executive Slacks. And now, even in the case of Spahn Ranch, I mean, just sort of dusting off all these old tapes. Lately, I've been going through all these old photos.
Hmm.
Somehow, I mean, I guess I've been around the block too many times, but somehow my personal photos and my band photos kind of got all mixed together in a
Yeah.
box. So I'm going through. In fact, I'm doing it this weekend. I'm going through boxes of photos of like ex-girlfriends and old cars I
Oh
own and
no.
mixed with live shows in Belgium with Spahn Ranch. And so I'm sort of separating like, okay, and then I'm starting to throw away a lot of those photos I just don't need anymore. But band stuff I'm trying to hang on to.
Yeah,
So
yeah, definitely. That's
but
awesome.
along the same lines, there's all these DAT tapes of live shows and things like that. So I'm starting to kind of go through that stuff to see what is possibly releasable and maybe what can also be reworked and brought
Yeah.
into a contemporary situation and maybe re-record. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. Now I heard also the people from Executive Slacks, they broke up and did what, Tubalcain?
Tubalcain was another project that I was involved in. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
a
was
little
it
bit more
91 and
like
93 or something like that?
that was about I'm trying to think now, about 91 to 94 is more
Okay,
like it.
okay.
So
Yep.
like
I'm
in that
a
time.
year off on all of these
Uh,
in my
well,
research.
well, you know how it is. It's like when you're sort of talking about it, it all depends on okay, when did the album come out in some cases, but in others it's when did you actually start the idea of that.
Okay.
I was looking up, some information earlier on a different band and again, I guess when did you record it and when was it released? Sometimes, you could have recorded it in 84, but it didn't get released until 86. So is that a 1986 release or do you think of it as a 1984
That's
release?
actually, yeah,
So,
isn't that
yeah,
so confusing? But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's so true though. They do the same thing with vehicles, do it a year like the 2025 release
Oh, I
comes
see what
out
you're
in
saying.
2024.
Well, I have a couple of old cars, and again, a lot of times back
Uh,
in the 50s and 60s, you could, if you wanted a 1960 Cadillac, you could have gone and bought it in 1959 and picked it up in October of 59, and it was already a 1960. So I
yeah,
see what you're talking about. But again, I
yeah,
think they can do that now where you can get a 2025 probably in September.
yeah,
So
exactly.
anyway.
So tell me about this project. What was it like? Was it kind of similar to Executive Slacks, or did it
Oh,
have its? Yeah.
Tubal-Cain was Tubalcain
Uh,
was an interesting time period in my
And
life
what does
because
that mean, by the way?
it's a It's out of the Bible of all places. It was a Masonic password. Tubalcain was like the father of music in the Bible.
Oh,
And so somehow it became the Masons in the United States in the 1800s, 1700s
okay.
started using a lot of this this biblical imagery, and one of their patron saints, I guess you could say, was Tubalcain. So so we just saw it and thought, oh, that's a good name for a band. Nobody's ever
Yeah.
used that before. So
Oh,
I don't think there was anything any deeper behind it, except in Executive Slacks, one of our members, John Young, was really into the Masons and their weird rituals and
yeah.
a lot of the stuff, the
There's a
mystery
lot of those around
surrounding.
here actually in
Yeah.
Idaho. Yeah,
I mean,
Masons and
again, there's
all that stuff.
sadly, I think they're dying out now, the Masons, but there's still a lot of Masonic halls across the country that are still active.
Yeah,
But that's where the name comes from. So
interesting.
we had we had been doing the Executive Slacks thing, and then one of the last original members of Executive Slacks that was still in the group left the group. So the rest of us realized, maybe it's time to change the name and try to record an album, which ultimately we did, and we were able to get out a CD at the time with Tubalcain.
Yeah,
And some of it was Executive Slacks material we had never released. Some of it was new material. And it was sort of like a metal industrial crossover thing. We put out two releases, and
almost like
and
a Dick Corrupts, a Dick Corrupts type idea.
yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah,
Yeah,
know
because
it's
I that's what I consider them. Like yeah, metal,
like the
industrial metal.
early DeCrups probably wasn't like that, but DeCrups in the '90s started to kind of get more into that
Oh
sound.
yeah, they did.
Like where Ministry, Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste, like that era of
Oh, love it.
industrial.
Perfect, perfect album.
Heavy tribal drums,
Yeah.
lots of guitars, some samples, and some electronics. But we had live bass. So we were a little bit of a hybrid. And it lasted for a while, but I thought the band was going to move to LA. So I moved on my own to LA right after we finished our first album. And as it turned out, the drummer in
And
Tubalcain
that was
also
25 Assorted Needles.
that's it, yeah. And so I ended up joining Spahn Ranch in '93, and later on, the drummer from Tubalcain ended up becoming the drummer in Spahn Ranch by about '95. So again, like one band kind of leads to another, and
Yeah.
Harry, the drummer from Tubalcain, and from very late in Executive Slacks, ended up playing in Spahn Ranch for that entire maybe that final 6 year window. He did all of our European tours, all of our American,
Wow.
not all of them, but most of our American tours with us.
Well, it seems okay. You go back and forth with goth and industrial a lot. What's more your passion? Do you or is both kind of like a little bit of a bit of you?
I guess I really come from. I
You
mean,
a metalhead?
I started in goth.
Are you
And
a metalhead?
I like some metal too. I definitely do. I mean,
Okay.
and so I started in goth, really when it comes to alternative, like underground,
Yeah.
experimental music. I guess goth was the first. Joy Division, Susie.
Bauhaus.
Yeah,
Yeah, because your
that's what
voice is
sucked me
really
in.
similar to, yeah, Peter Murphy's type of style. You know how to sing. He knows how to sing too. It's
And
like,
I came at
you know
it
what I
from
mean?
more of a Bowie psychedelic furs sort of background. Then I
Gotcha.
ended up getting into more, gothic, what became goth. And it wasn't real. I just kind of fell into it. So I really start there with in my Fahrenheit years being, into the more goth stuff before it was called goth. And later on, I mean, I liked Ministry. I did like, I liked Front 242. I liked a few of the bands, but it really wasn't until I joined Executive Slacks. I started to get into it a little bit more, Killing Joke, maybe some Skinny Puppy, but I never got deeply, deeply into it maybe until my Spahn Ranch years, where
Yeah,
really, when I first joined the band and we had distorted vocals with Spahn Ranch, I started to get far more into more, industrial music as a whole, more of the European stuff, Leather Strip. Again, Front 242 kind of comes back to me, and Nights Are Ebb, and a lot of that kind of thing I started to get
yeah,
into. But then even that, as we were talking with Matt last week with Spahn Ranch, after the first release and maybe an EP or two, I started to sing. Well, it was Matt who really talked me into singing more the way I did in my Fahrenheit years,
yeah,
but on top of the electronics. So I end up kind of, goth, industrial, kind of
yeah,
going back and forth.
exactly.
And
You're
over
yo-yo.
the years, I guess I've just figured out a way to make a hybrid of the two
Yeah,
because they're two scenes that kind of run alongside each other in a lot of ways.
they do actually. They're kind of hand in hand. There
I
is
both because they're both well, they're both dark, but in different ways from each other. But I
exactly.
think that there's ways to actually make electronic music that's normally more industrial leaning, but to kind of figure out a way to blend both worlds. And since they've both been such a big part of my life,
Yeah,
I'd like to do that now. And then even when I was in Black Tape for a Blue Girl, I end up kind of doing more ethereal, dark cabaret stuff. So I end
yeah,
up pulling those into what I do, and then even a little bit of jazz crooner kind of stuff. I pull a little bit of that into what I do just
yeah.
to keep it interesting. So
Yeah.
that's what it
So
seems
what
like.
are you when you're on stage, you feel more comfortable doing the industrial or singing the gothic?
I guess the style I use live is definitely more the latter, more of a
Yeah,
crooner, more of like, again, I guess I aspire to be more like at least live, like more like Nick Cave or like Richard
gotcha.
Butler in the Psychedelic Furs or certain parts of Bowie's career. And then, I even throw in some Sinatra and Bobby Darin just
Oh
because
yeah,
I
I
like
can see you
the
pulling it off.
command of the stage that those guys had. I may not sing like that when I sing with Noir, but I kind of pinch a few of their ideas. And then even some female vocalists, I kind of, that command of the stage that
Yeah,
even Billie Holiday had or Ella Fitzgerald had, like Marlene Dietrich. I was able to learn a lot about the Edith Piaf. You
yeah,
learn a lot about the how to bring the theatrics into what you do, even though it's the opposite sex. It doesn't matter. It's still the same command.
exactly. Yes, yes, it is. Well said. Wow, that was deep. Tell me about 96. You were in a project Vampire Rodents?
That was yet another. I was a side project of mine. An interesting guy from the Southwest. It was an idea. There was a label in San Diego called Reconstriction Records, and they were an industrial label that was part of a punk label. And
Okay.
they were putting out a lot of bands at the time. And I befriended the owner of the label, and he had this obscure artist, Vampire Rodents, who was mostly a sample-based electronic, almost like soundtrack music in some ways. And he also was really into like Warner Brothers 1950s cartoon music. So he would try to figure out how to bring all these worlds together with some classical samples. And he wasn't a singer. So the guy who ran this label came up with this idea of bringing in myself, the singer from ChemLab, singers from other bands to guest with this guy, and Daniel was his name. And so I ended up singing maybe 5 or 6 songs on one of his albums. And I mean, I had it was in a it's funny you point that out because it's like I don't really think of that era all that often, but it's kind of the beginning of me becoming like this crazy side project guy. So here I am in the middle of my Spahn Ranch years, and whenever somebody would say, "Hey, do you want to work on?" I would say yes. I never said no. I don't think.
You were the
Um,
Nick Cage,
yeah, I guess I was kind of the Nick
the Nick
Cage of
Cage of
industrial
music.
music. I never said
I
no.
won't say no.
Exactly. He never seems to say no.
That's right.
Ghost Rider 7, I'm in.
You
You know,
notice what he said though, it was, and I'm sorry to interrupt, is that he is an actor. That's his job. So why say no?
Right, right.
you know?
And again, I think he's also a workaholic. And if there's something that
Exactly.
I, along the same lines, like anything that's creative and interesting that I can apply what I do to,
Yeah.
at least historically, not as much now, but a little bit. I have some side projects now, but back then, I used to just do whatever I could. At the time, I was also working at Cleopatra, and I was doing A&R for Cleopatra, and working on liner notes and things like that. So it wasn't just, these weren't just projects that I worked on. I had a place I could release them. So
Got it.
I actually had something I could record them and be creative and then actually add them to compilations and get them out there into the universe. We didn't have Spotify and Bandcamp back then, so you had to be on a compact disc. You had
Yeah.
to be on compilations. You had to kind of get it out, in a little bit more of a tangible way than, of course, we can do things now. Now you can, in a sense, not that it's easier because there's a lot more competition, but you could
Yeah.
record an album over a weekend and Monday morning have it up on Spotify and Bandcamp. It's kind of crazy. Like
That is
we
true.
we didn't have that luxury then.
Yeah. And now we're on up to the Blue Dahlia. So that's a 2000 that came out. Your first album. You had two albums, right?
Right.
Okay, Blue Dahlia and a tribute to Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, so that was an opportunity for me to finally do sort of like a late 40s, 1950s um crooner album, a straight up
Yeah.
crooner album of like basically, the kind of material that like Nat King Cole and Frank
Yeah.
Sinatra and Billy
E.
Eckstine and all those crooners actually did back then. Um, and uh, and so I was happy. I I can sing that material, but I'm not a trained vocalist, so I don't have a background in that kind of material. So I was very intimidated by it because, I mean, it's very musical. And again, I'm not a great musician. So at the end of the day, you have to really, I mean, to focus on those melodies, to focus on the phrasing, it requires years of experience. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why, the best people that even in a contemporary sense, even the Harry Connick Jr. types,
Yeah.
again, I mean, that guy was raised on that kind of music.
Yeah.
And I always liked it and I was always a fan of it. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean
Definitely
that it's
very
easy to make.
talented too.
So again, like I I'm happy I made those records, but and again, I would actually return to making material like that, but playing in more of a jazz-based group is quite a commitment.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Now we're up to Black Tape for a Blue Girl. Tell me about that
Now,
project. You have all these different projects. Are they different parts of you?
I guess you could say that. I mean, in some cases, they're just opportunities that presented themselves, and I just happened to be, somebody needed a
Right
singer.
time, huh?
Well, Black Tape for a Blue Girls had a lot of different vocalists over the years. And Sam, the leader of that group, has been doing it for as long as I have. He put out his first record the same year I did, 86.
Wow.
And I had moved back to New York after Spahn Ranch broke up. I moved back to New York and I actually retired from making music. So I stopped from late 99 until about I mean, granted, some things came out in 2000 and 2001, but I had already recorded a lot of that stuff. So I stopped for nearly 10 years. From 99, 2000 to about 2009, I stopped. I sang a little bit. I had made some recordings with Black Tape, like one or two recordings, because he had moved to Brooklyn around the same time period I did. But I really had gone behind the scenes of music. I just burned out.
Oh, just burned out. Okay, I was
I just
gonna
burned
ask.
out. I mean, it was just Spawn Ranch had done over 200 shows in 8 years. And I loved my time in LA, but I moved back to New York and we broke up Spawn Ranch and I needed a break. I didn't expect it to last 10 years.
Yeah, yeah,
So 2009, Sam asked me, like, hey, do you want to be in the band? I want to go out and start playing some live shows. I want to record this album. And I did some soul searching and I realized, let me do this. Let me see what happens. I
yeah,
want to get
yeah.
back into this. I always admired his music. Um, he writes all of the music, barring a few of the lyrics that I had assembled, but he was making it kind of easy on me.
Hmm.
And it was a way for me to get involved in yet another form of music, more of a dark cabaret, gothy, ethereal atmosphere,
Yeah.
and just try something different. And so I recorded an album with them, and did some touring with them, recorded some EPs, toured the US, did some European shows. I was in the group for about 3 or 4 years. And so I was and then what ended up happening is takes so long in between records
Yeah.
that I was so into doing it that I didn't want to stop. So in between records, he would take these long breaks, and it was like a year and nothing had gone on. So I started Noir as a side project just to stay busy.
Yeah.
And then Noir ends up becoming my main thing. It's like that's how music is. It's just like a fluke sometimes.
Yeah.
So Noir started out of inactivity, but then ultimately became my main thing.
And you got a lot of albums on what, seven, six, seven albums?
Overall or Noir?
Yeah. Noir.
Noir, well, Noir has really just a couple of albums, and a lot of it's a bunch of EPs and singles.
Okay, a bunch of
So,
EPs.
but again, that's more rooted in again, the game has changed a little bit. People put
Yeah.
out singles now, which seems to be like the main crux. It's not just in this particular scene, but in all different genres of music.
Of
People
course.
seem to put out music in smaller portions, in bite-sized portions, I guess you could say. So
Yes.
people putting out these singles. So my version of it is I usually put out these EPs that
Yes.
are
EPs are
4 or 5 songs.
always safe. They're always safe to put out.
Yeah, they're
A
not, it's
good
not a
old
full
EP.
album commitment, but to
Of
me, I treat them like albums, but they're really more, extended play EPs.
Exactly.
But singles are just, they're too one-dimensional. I mean, it's just really one song. And I've done
Yeah.
that before, but I prefer at least like, well, here's a song, here's a remix, here's a couple of covers, and here's a B-side. And so then I put that kind of thing out.
But so tell me about your new project then. Tell me what are you accomplishing with this project? What do you get out of it?
With Noir,
And
well,
yeah, and what are you trying to present to people? You know,
well,
what are you trying to say?
what I like about I'm mellowing out as I'm getting older. There's no two ways about
Gotcha.
it. And
Gotcha.
so Noir is a way for me to have more of a collaborative project that um it's a little bit of a revolving door, the personnel. So I mean, I have Eric Gustafsson who's been with me for a while. He does a lot of my programming, plays guitar, produces. I have Jamie and Kai who play live with me, and Kai does a lot of the female vocals in the studio. I have Rebecca who plays violin and cello. She's in the Neurofarm, another band in Maryland. I've had and now I have Dan from Silverworks who's now in the so I have this bit of a revolving door of different musicians. It's kind of a thing that I borrowed from David Bowie.
Oh,
Bowie always had sort of a revolving door of musicians that he would kind of bring in, bring out. Sometimes he would return to people, sometimes he wouldn't. I think if you can change the if you can change the players a little bit,
yeah.
sometimes it helps drive the direction of the music. Like I think I'm always the same, and so but I like to change the background a little bit, the environment a
I
little bit.
gotcha.
And
Yes.
so that's
You
what
you are very consistent on how
well,
you
Lamar has
present
enabled
yourself.
me to do that. And
Yeah.
again, it kind of happened by accident. There's also Tracy, a cellist from up in Boston. She's played with me a lot and lent her talents to things. My friend Ray, who comes from a completely different genre of music. I mean, Ray is a little bit more of an R&B meets somewhere where R&B meets sort of like psychedelic, even Grateful Dead elements. Ray and I are working on a lot of acoustic music. Ray played all of did all of the arranging and everything on that cover
Mm.
of the Psychedelic Furs I did. So I'm able to, with Noir, kind of mix it all up a little. And ultimately, I think it keeps it interesting. But Noir
Yes, of
also
course.
enables me to stay involved without having, this is the best thing about digital music, is that you can be, um, it's a full-time entity that in some ways I can visit when I want to and I can walk away when I want to. And again,
Yes.
you can knock out material and release it very easily on these digital platforms.
Yeah.
Um, Go out and play a few live shows and be a consistent live entity without the full-time commitment. Uh,
Yes. I was going to
so
say that. I was
yeah.
biting my tongue. The word is commitment. Yes, definitely. You don't have to deal with that commitment.
Yeah, I don't have to go out and
So
do,
that's
I mean, again, like, I
brilliant.
guess I'm at a point in my life where I don't want to go out and do 30,
No,
40 shows a year. I only
of
want to
course
do four.
not.
So,
Yeah.
uh,
You kind of want
and
to enjoy it. Just enjoy it a little bit,
and also too, the other thing
Do
is
your
that I have to
passion.
confess to, Matt had said something about this, but for himself, but as it relates to me, I can't write lyrics the way I used to write. I
Yeah.
used to be able to write, sit down and write, and I could just do it all of the time, and I could be collaborate on 12 or 15 songs a year. Now I'm lucky if I can write 2 or 3 songs a year tops. And so
Gotcha.
I just don't have that. I'm not as prolific as I once was. And so, I end up recording some covers and some stuff to sort of bridge the gap. And yet I don't think if suddenly I had to sit down and I don't think I could write 2 or 3 albums worth of material. I just don't know if I have that in me anymore. And I'm
But you're
fine.
in a different chapter of your life right now,
Yes, that's true. Yes.
So you don't need to. You already proved yourself. You proved yourself on the stage and by writing albums in couple different genres. I mean, several genres. I mean, you've done your job,
Well,
and
thank
I think it's time to sit back and finally enjoy the fruits of your labor.
I
You
do a
know,
little bit of that when I can. I mean, I do like
yeah.
doing material and I do like
And
performing.
singing is part of it. No, I'm not trying to. You do enjoy your singing. That's part of the love of your life. Your family, and your music. So you don't want to let go of it. That's why we have your new project out. So that's wonderful. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you,
Thank
and I
you.
hope you continue to go down this route and put out an industrial album soon. Just joking. I doubt it. Well, I'm really happy for you for taking the time out to talk
Thank you.
with me, and you're really interesting, man. And I'm really so happy to get to know you, and it's a
Thanks.
blessing. It totally is. Uh, um, so we're gonna look for. Do you have any more songs in the works, or you gonna do any kind of shows? Do you do shows for your?
Noir, in fact, Noir just played a show last weekend in Newark, New Jersey at a place called QXT's. Noir has another show coming up in September in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wonderful.
Uh, I have another show in January coming up, well, January 2025 in Easton, Pennsylvania. There's a New York show in the fall that hasn't been, the ink isn't dry on the deal on that yet. So I do play, like I said, I play four or
Wonderful.
five times a year. So there's that. I've got a new side project with a group in Pittsburgh called The Shimmering. And that's a little bit more of that's kind of like an old school, it's like gothic psychedelia. It's like
Ooh.
early Christian death with a little bit of I don't even know.
Now you're
Again, it's like
talking.
a little jammy. I mean, it's the first real organic thing I've done in a while. It's bass drums, guitar, and vocals. I mean,
Oh,
it's
that's
kind
so
of a
awesome.
throwback to my Fahrenheit days.
That's wonderful. I'm so excited. Okay, because that's my stuff. I love it. That's my
And
favorite.
I'll send it to you when I have something more concrete.
Thank you. I
Uh,
appreciate it.
I also actually you might find this interesting. Remember the band Wolfsheim?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're a little bit more of like a German synth pop industrial
Yeah. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
One of the guys from that group is putting out a solo thing,
Huh.
and um, and I recorded some vocals on that. There's always, like I said, I rarely ever say no.
Yeah.
So there's always things coming out. So
You're the yes man.
I kind of am the yes man. So well, I look as and I guess I'm also blessed in that, people do send it's not like people send me crappy material. Like
Yeah.
people genuinely send me interesting things, and I see myself in it. And then I think, yeah, I can do this. I can actually, I mean, I don't do it just to do it. If I can see something fruitful in collaborating with someone. If somebody sends me I was like, yeah, I think I can bring something to the table on that because I'm not going to waste people's time,
Of course.
and so I'm into it. So
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you, Ethan, and I thank you for all you've done for music and for our scene and continue to do. And I love you, man. So
thanks,
thank
man. Thank
you.
you very much. I
Appreciate our
appreciate the support.
friendship,
Thank you.
and you're welcome anytime. And when your new project has something going, and you guys want to get together, let's do that. Let's have a little interview.
All right, we'll
New
talk soon, man.
project, okay? Take
Okay.
care of yourself. Bless you and yours. Love you.
Thanks.
Take care, bud.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.
We now conclude our broadcast day. Barely heard from Tron ever more deeply. Turn off the news in the atmosphere. A self-fulfilling prophecy in fear. I know what your words will be in the cobalt eyes of Julie. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. Before the die is cast, turn to ash inside of them all. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to spend an evening with an image of all things. This visage before the die is cast away. Turn to ash in their mouths. A human way of my house. Spend the evening with an image. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. It was a pleasure to burn, such a pleasure to burn. It was a pleasure to burn.